The wedding dress had been white that morning. Now, red dust from the desert trail clung to its lace edges, and tear stains marked the bodice where Evelyn Mercer had pressed her bound hands against her face. The rope cut into her wrists, rough hemp that left angry marks on her pale skin. She'd stopped fighting against it an hour ago when the wagon hit a particularly deep rut, nearly throwing her from the bed where they'd tossed her like a sack of grain. Through the canvas covering, she could hear the men talking. 3 of them she'd counted their voices when they'd taken her. The one they called Brenner seemed to be in charge. His was the voice that had spoken so calmly outside the church, telling her father's ranch hand that Miss Mercer had urgent business to attend to. That same voice had covered her mouth with a chloroform-soaked rag when she'd stepped around the corner of the church, thinking someone needed help. "Stop your sniffling back there." Brenner called out. "You'll need to look presentable when we reach Silver Ridge. Mr. Langford don't like his merchandise damaged." "Merchandise?" The word made her stomach turn. Evelyn pressed herself against the wagon's side, trying to see through a gap in the canvas. The landscape was unfamiliar red rocks and sparse juniper trees. Nothing like the green valleys around Cypress Hollow where she'd grown up. They were taking her farther from home with every turn of the wheels. "Please," she called out, her voice hoarse from crying. "My father will pay whatever ransom you want. Just take me back." Laughter erupted from the front of the wagon. One of the other men, younger sounding, said something she couldn't quite catch. Then Brenner's voice cut through clearly. "Ransom. You think this is about money? Little miss, your daddy already thinks you've run off. Left a real nice note explaining how you couldn't go through with marrying James Morrison. How you needed to see the world. Find yourself." He chuckled. "My partner in town has beautiful handwriting. Could have fooled anyone." Evelyn's heart sank. James. He'd be standing at the altar right now, waiting. They'd known each other since childhood, had planned this wedding for months. Her mother had spent weeks on her dress, adding each piece of lace by hand, and her father, he'd never believed she'd run away. Would he? "They'll know it's a lie," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I would never—" "Would never what? Run off the morning of your wedding. Plenty of brides get cold feet. Happens all the time out here. Your James Morrison will move on quick enough. Probably marry that Baker girl who's been making eyes at him." The wagon lurched to a stop. Evelyn heard the men climbing down, their boots hitting the hard ground. Someone was unhitching the horses. They were stopping for water, maybe, or to rest. She tested the ropes again, but whoever had tied them knew their business. The canvas flap lifted, and bright sunlight stabbed at her eyes. Brenner's face appeared weathered, with a gray-streaked beard and cold blue eyes. He might have been handsome once, before the desert sun and hard living had carved deep lines around his mouth and eyes. "Time to water the horses," he said. "You need to relieve yourself. Now's the time. But don't try nothing stupid. We're 30 miles from anywhere, and the desert ain't kind to city girls in wedding dresses." He cut the rope around her ankles but left her hands bound. One of the other men, a scarred Mexican with missing front teeth, helped her down from the wagon. Her legs, numb from sitting, nearly buckled. The wedding dress, with its full skirt and multiple petticoats, made walking difficult on the uneven ground. They led her behind a cluster of rocks. She could feel their eyes on her, making sure she didn't run. Where would she go? Brenner was right. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by distant mesas and the occasional twisted tree. When they brought her back to the wagon, the younger man, barely older than her own 21 years, offered her water from a canteen. His hands shook slightly as he held it to her lips. "Don't be kind to her, Ethan." Brenner snapped. "She ain't nothing but a job. $300 when we deliver her to Langford. That's all she is." $300, the price of her life, her freedom, her future, less than what her father paid for a good horse. "Who is this Langford?" Evelyn asked as they loaded her back into the wagon. "What does he want with me?" Brenner's smile was cruel. "Theodore Langford's got himself a big ranch out near Silver Ridge. Lost his wife to fever last winter. Man gets lonely out there. Needs a woman to manage his household, see to his needs. But I don't know him. I've never even heard of him. You can't just... Can't what lots of women come west as mail-order brides. Only difference is, Langford don't like to wait for letters and such. He's seen you when he was passing through Cypress Hollow last month. Took a fancy to that pretty face and that yellow hair. Paid us half up front to fetch you. The wagon started moving again. Evelyn pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself smaller. The wedding dress, which had felt like a princess gown that morning, now felt like a shroud. She thought of her mother, probably crying in the church, her father, reading that forged note. James, confused and hurt. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, and the temperature inside the wagon grew stifling. Dust seeped through every crack, coating her throat and making her cough. The men stopped talking, focused on navigating increasingly rough terrain. They were entering a canyon now, she could tell by how the sound of the horses' hooves echoed off rock walls. The wagon tilted at steep angles, and more than once she heard Brenner curse as they navigated around boulders. How much further, the young one? Ethan asked. We'll camp at Devil's Bowl tonight. Brenner replied, reach Silver Ridge by tomorrow afternoon if we push hard. Tomorrow afternoon, less than a day before she became property of a stranger. Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to think. There had to be a way out. These men were confident, maybe too confident. They thought they'd broken her spirit with tears and rope. But Evelyn Mercer hadn't grown up on a ranch without learning a thing or two. Her father had taught her to ride before she could properly walk. She could shoot, too, though her mother disapproved of such unladylike skills. If she could just get free, get to a horse. The wagon slowed as they entered a narrower part of the canyon. The walls pressed close on either side, and Evelyn could hear the men's voices tight with concentration as they guided the horses through. That's when she heard it hoofbeats, fast and hard, coming from behind, a single rider by the sound of it, pushing their mount at dangerous speeds through the rocky terrain. You hear that? Ethan's voice was high, nervous. I hear it, Brenner said. She heard the distinctive click of a hammer being pulled back on a revolver. Could be anyone, traveler trying to catch up before dark. But something in his tone suggested he didn't believe that. The hoofbeats grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. Whoever was coming wasn't trying to hide their approach. The wagon stopped completely. Evelyn pressed her ear to the canvas, straining to hear. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Was it someone looking for her? Had her father discovered the truth somehow? That's far enough, stranger, Brenner called out. The hoofbeats stopped. A horse snorted, breathing hard from the run. Then a voice, deep and steady, with an edge sharp as a blade. You've got something that don't belong to you. Evelyn didn't recognize the voice, but something about it made her sit up straighter. This wasn't one of her father's men. This was someone else entirely. Don't know what you're talking about, friend. Brenner replied, just honest freight haulers heading to Silver Ridge with supplies. Funny thing about that, I was in Cypress Hollow this morning. Saw a real sad scene at the church. Pretty bride gone missing on her wedding day. Her daddy's offering $1,000 to anyone who brings her home safe. $1,000? More than triple what Langford was paying? Evelyn held her breath, hoping greed might work in her favor. Like I said, Brenner's voice had gone cold. Don't know nothing about any missing bride. Silence stretched between them. Then the stranger spoke again. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to let the lady go. You're going to turn this wagon around and head back the way you came. And you're going to thank the good Lord above that I'm giving you this chance to ride away. Brenner laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're outnumbered 3-1. Cowboy. Best you turn that horse around before you end up feeding the buzzards. Could be, or could be I put all three of you down before you clear leather. Want to find out which? The tension in the canyon could have been cut with a knife. Through the canvas, Evelyn could hear the creak of leather as men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward weapons. Her mouth went dry. Was she about to be caught in the middle of a gunfight? Now, let's all stay calm, Brenner said. But his voice had lost its earlier confidence. No need for anyone to die today over a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding here, the stranger replied. I tracked you from Cypress Hollow. 3 men, 1 wagon, heading into canyon country. The lady's father gave a good description of the men who were asking questions about his daughter yesterday. Funny how you match it perfect. Evelyn heard someone dismounting one of Brenner's men. She thought, the scrape of boots on stone. They were positioning themselves for a fight. Even if what you're saying is true, Brenner said slowly. And I ain't saying it is. This would be a business arrangement. The lady's been promised to Mr. Theodore Langford. Money's changed hands. Can't just break a contract. Contract? The stranger's laugh was cold as winter wind. Since when is kidnapping a contract? You let her out of that wagon right now, or I'll put you down like the rabid dogs you are. Through a tear in the canvas, Evelyn caught her first glimpse of him. He sat tall in the saddle of a black horse, wearing a long duster coat that had seen better days. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could see a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble. His hand rested easy on the butt of a Colt .45 like it belonged there. Who are you, mister? Young Ethan asked, his voice cracking. You ain't the law. Name's Weston Hale. And no, I ain't the law. Law would arrest you. Give you a trial. Me, I've got simpler ways of handling men who steal women. Weston Hale. The name meant nothing to Evelyn, but the way he said it like it should mean something, like it carried weight, made Brenner's men exchange glances. I've heard of you, the Mexican said quietly. You're the one who... That's right, Weston cut him off. So you know I mean what I say. The lady comes with me. Now. Brenner spat into the dust. $300. That's what we're owed. You want to buy out our contract. That's the price. Here's my counteroffer. Weston's voice dropped even lower. You leave with your lives. That's payment enough for the likes of you. Everything happened at once. Brenner went for his gun, shouting for his men to take cover. The canyon exploded with the sound of gunfire, the reports echoing off the rocks like thunder. Evelyn threw herself flat in the wagon bed, hands still bound, pressing her face into the rough boards. 3 shots, fired so fast they almost sounded like one. Then silence, except for the horse's nervous stamping and someone groaning in pain. Anyone else want to test me? Weston called out. Don't shoot. Ethan's voice was high with panic. Brenner's down. Miguel's hit in the shoulder. Then you'd best get them loaded up and get out of here. Leave the wagon. Evelyn heard scrambling, cursing, the sounds of men helping wounded companions. She risked lifting her head and saw through the canvas tear that Brenner was slumped against a rock, holding his right arm. Blood seeped between his fingers. The Mexican sat on the ground, clutching his shoulder. Neither wound looked fatal, but both men were effectively out of the fight. Young Ethan stood with his hands raised, looking like he might cry. The girl, Brenner gasped. Langford will send men. You don't know who you're crossing. She's mine now, Weston said simply. Anyone who's got a problem with that can take it up with me personal. Now get going before I change my mind about letting you live. It took them several minutes to get Brenner and Miguel on horses. Ethan had to help, his hands shaking as he tried to stop the bleeding with torn pieces of his shirt. All the while, Weston sat motionless on his black horse, gun still in hand, watching. Finally, they rode off. Brenner slumped forward in his saddle, Miguel gripping his horn with his good hand. Ethan looked back once, fear plain on his young face, then spurred his horse after the others. Weston waited until they were out of sight before dismounting. His spurs rang against the stones as he approached the wagon. Evelyn sat up, her heart pounding. She'd traded one captor for another, and she didn't know if her situation had improved or gotten worse. He pulled back the canvas flap, and for the first time she saw his face clearly. Weathered, but not old, maybe 30. 35. Dark hair that needed cutting hung past his collar. His eyes were gray as storm clouds, set in a face that might have been handsome if not for the hard lines etched around his mouth and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. Those gray eyes took in her appearance, the ruined wedding dress, the tear-stained face, the rope around her wrists. Something flickered across his features. Anger, pity. It was gone before she could identify it. "Miss Mercer," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Your father sent me to bring you home." Relief flooded through her so suddenly she almost sobbed. "My father, he knows. Oh, thank God. Please, can you untie me? We need to hurry back. James must be worried sick. And Mother—" "Hold still!" He climbed into the wagon and drew a knife from his boot. The blade sliced through the rope like it was paper. "There. Can you ride?" Evelyn rubbed her wrists, wincing at the raw skin. "Yes, of course. But where are the horses? Didn't you bring a wagon?" He helped her down, his hands careful but impersonal, like he was handling something fragile he didn't want to break. "Just my horse. You'll ride with me." She looked at the black horse, then down at her wedding dress with its yards of fabric and multiple petticoats. This dress, it's not exactly made for riding." "No, ma'am, I don't suppose it is." He studied the problem for a moment, then went to the abandoned wagon. From among the supplies, he pulled out a blanket and used his knife to cut a hole in the center. "Put this on like a poncho. It'll help some." It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. The rough wool covered the worst of the damaged dress. Evelyn had ridden astride before, though never in formal wear and never sharing a saddle with a stranger. Weston mounted first, then reached down to help her up. She had to bunch her skirts in a decidedly unladylike fashion, but managed to settle behind him. The position forced an intimacy she wasn't prepared for, her arms around his waist, her body pressed against his back. "Hold tight," he said. "We need to put distance between us and them before dark." The black horse, he called it Sovereign, picked its way carefully through the canyon. Weston rode with the easy grace of a man who'd spent more time in the saddle than out of it. He didn't speak, all his attention on the trail and their surroundings. Evelyn had 1,000 questions, but something about his silence discouraged conversation. Instead, she focused on staying balanced as they navigated the rough terrain. The wedding dress, even covered by the blanket, made everything difficult. The stays of her corset dug into her ribs, and the weight of the wet petticoats, wet from tears and sweat, pulled at her constantly. They rode for what felt like hours. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Despite everything, Evelyn couldn't help but notice the wild beauty of the landscape. It was nothing like the gentle hills around Cypress Hollow. Finally, as purple shadows began to fill the canyon depths, Weston guided Sovereign off the main trail. They followed a barely visible path that wound between massive boulders, eventually opening into a small, protected clearing. A spring bubbled up from the rocks, feeding a pool of clear water before disappearing into the sand. "We'll camp here tonight," he said, dismounting with fluid ease. "Camp?" Evelyn accepted his help down, her legs stiff from the ride. "But shouldn't we keep going? My family?" "Your family thinks you ran off." That's what the note said. According to talk in town, they're hurt and confused, but they ain't worried for your safety. Another night won't change that. And riding these trails in the dark is a good way to end up dead. He was already unsaddling Sovereign, his movements efficient and practiced. Evelyn stood uncertainly, acutely aware that she was alone in the wilderness with a man she didn't know. Yes, he'd rescued her from Brenner. But what did she really know about Weston Hale? "I heard that man, the Mexican, recognize your name," she said carefully. "You've done this before, rescued people." His hands stilled on the saddle. "Not exactly." When he didn't elaborate, she tried again. "Then how did you know? How did you find me?" "I was in Cypress Hollow on business. Heard the commotion at the church, saw your daddy organizing search parties. Town was full of talk about the runaway bride. He set the saddle aside and began rubbing down his horse. Thing is, I also saw 3 strangers in the saloon yesterday, asking questions about the banker's daughter, about her wedding, her routine. And you put it together. Wasn't hard. Men like Brenner, they got a look about them. Seen their kind before. His jaw tightened. So when I heard you'd gone missing, I knew which way they'd head. This canyon's the fastest route to Silver Ridge if you're avoiding the main roads. Evelyn sank down on a flat rock, suddenly exhausted. The events of the day crashed over her like a wave. This morning she'd been preparing for her wedding, her mother fussing with her veil, her bridesmaids giggling about married life. Now she was sitting in the dirt in a ruined wedding dress, rescued by a gunfighter who may or may not be trustworthy. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why help me? You don't know me. My father didn't hire you. You said he thinks I ran away. So why risk your life for a stranger?" Weston was building a fire, arranging kindling with careful precision. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Because I've seen what happens to women who get sold to men like Langford. Because I know what it's like to be too late to stop it." He struck a match, and the kindling caught. Because some things a man can't ride away from, no matter how hard he tries. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls. Evelyn watched Weston work, noting the economy of his movements as he unpacked supplies from his saddlebags. Everything about him spoke of a man accustomed to solitude, to taking care of himself in harsh places. He handed her a canteen. "Drink. You've had nothing since this morning, I'd wager." The water was warm, but clean, and she drank gratefully. Her stomach reminded her loudly that she'd been too nervous to eat breakfast, what seemed like a lifetime ago. "I've got some jerky and hardtack," he said, producing a wrapped bundle. "Not fancy, but it'll keep you going." "Thank you." She accepted the dried meat, trying not to wolf it down despite her hunger. "Mr. Hale, I need to know what happened back there, with those men. Will they come after us?" "Doubt it. Brenner's smart enough to know when he's beat. He'll need to get that arm tended, and Miguel won't be fighting anybody for a while." He settled across the fire from her, his back against a boulder. Besides, they were hired guns, not true believers. With the job gone bad, they'll likely move on to easier pickings. "And this Langford will he send more men?" Weston's expression darkened. "Probably. Men like Theodore Langford don't like being denied what they think they've bought. But that's a problem for tomorrow." Evelyn shivered. Despite the fire's warmth, the blanket poncho helped. But the wedding dress beneath was damp with sweat and dust. She could feel her hair, so carefully arranged that morning, hanging in limp strands around her face. She must look a fright. "Miss Mercer," Weston said quietly, "I know this ain't proper, but you need to get out of that dress. It's wet, and the desert gets cold at night. You'll catch your death." Heat flooded her cheeks. I couldn't possibly." "I've got spare clothes in my pack. Shirt and trousers. They'll be too big, but they're clean and dry." He was already pulling items from his saddlebags. "I'll turn my back while you change. Give you privacy." The practical part of her knew he was right. The dress was ruined anyway, and the corset beneath felt like iron bands around her ribs. But changing clothes in the wilderness with a strange man nearby went against every principle of propriety she'd been raised with. "Or you can stay in wet clothes and be miserable all night," he added, setting the garments on a rock near her. "Your choice." He stood and walked to tend his horse, pointedly keeping his back turned. Evelyn stared at the clothes, a blue cotton shirt, worn but clean, and canvas trousers that would certainly need rolling up. After a moment's hesitation, practicality won. Getting out of the wedding dress alone proved nearly impossible. The buttons down the back had been designed for a maid's help. She struggled, twisting awkwardly, until frustration brought tears to her eyes. "Trouble?" Weston asked, still facing away. The buttons, she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. I can't reach them all. She heard him sigh. All right, I'll help, but I'll keep my eyes on the rocks ahead. Word of honor. He approached slowly, giving her time to object. When she didn't, he stopped behind her. His fingers worked quickly down the row of pearl buttons, and she was struck by how gentle they were. Hands that had drawn a gun faster than thought could move with surprising delicacy. There, he said, stepping back immediately. That should do it. Thank you, she whispered. He returned to his horse while she struggled out of the dress and its numerous petticoats. The corset was another challenge, but she managed the front laces. The relief when it finally loosened was so intense she nearly gasped. Weston's shirt fell past her knees like a nightgown, and the trousers needed significant rolling, but the feeling of clean, dry clothes was heavenly. She folded the wedding dress carefully, though she doubted it could be salvaged. All that work, all those hours her mother had spent. Better, Weston asked when she gave permission for him to return. Much. She settled back by the fire, oddly more comfortable in men's clothing than she'd ever been in formal wear. Though I doubt my mother would approve. Your mother would want you warm and safe, he said firmly. The rest is just fabric. They sat in companionable silence for a while. The fire popped and hissed, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called. The sound made Evelyn edge slightly closer to the light. You haven't asked me much, she observed, about my life, my family, why those men targeted me specifically. Figure you'll tell me what you want to tell me. Rest ain't my business. But surely you're curious. You risked your life for a stranger. He poked at the fire with a stick. I know enough. You're Andrew Mercer's daughter. He owns the bank in Cypress Hollow, has interests in mining and cattle. Rich man. Good man, too. From what I hear, you were marrying the Morrison boy. His family runs the general store and freight company. You learned all that in one morning. People talk when they're worried. Your daddy had half the town looking for you. Evelyn hugged her knees to her chest. Poor Papa. He must be beside himself. And James, she trailed off, realizing she'd thought more about her parents' distress than her fiancé's. You love him, this James Morrison? The question caught her off guard. Of course, we've known each other forever. He's kind, steady. He'll make a good husband. That ain't what I asked. She looked at him across the fire. This dangerous stranger who'd appeared like something out of the dime novels her mother disapproved of. Love is complicated. James and I are well suited. Our families approve. It's a good match. Still ain't an answer. What do you know of love? Mr. Hale. The words came out sharper than intended. You ride alone, live by the gun. What could you possibly understand about the compromises required for a stable life? His gray eyes held hers for a long moment. More than you might think, Miss Mercer. But you're right, it ain't my place to judge. Shame washed over her. He'd saved her life. And here she was, snapping at him like a spoiled child. I'm sorry, that was unkind. No need for apologies. You've had a hard day. Tell me about yourself, she said, trying to make amends. You mentioned you've dealt with men like Brenner before. His jaw tightened. That's a longer story than we've got time for. We have all night. Some stories are better left untold. He stood abruptly. You should get some sleep. I'll keep watch. Surely you need rest too. I'll manage. Got my bedroll here, you take it. He pulled a worn blanket from his pack and spread it near the fire. Ground's hard, but it's better than nothing. Evelyn wanted to protest, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a tide. The events of the day, the kidnapping, the fear, the rescue had drained her completely. She settled onto the bedroll, acutely aware of how it smelled like leather and something uniquely masculine. Mr. Hale, she said softly. Weston, he corrected. Might as well use my given name. Considering. Weston. The name felt strange on her tongue. What you said earlier, about seeing what happens to women who get sold, about being too late to stop it. What did you mean?" He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, like he was seeing something far away. "I had a sister once, Sarah, sweetest girl you ever met. Our parents died when she was 15, and I tried to take care of her. But I was young and wild. Spent more time gambling and fighting than looking after her proper." Evelyn held her breath, sensing this was something he didn't share often. "Man came through town when I was away. Cornelius Wade, smooth talker, fancy clothes, convinced Sarah he wanted to marry her, take her to California where he had business interests. She was so excited, so sure she'd found her fairy tale ending. What happened? Wade didn't have business interests. He had a system. Find pretty girls with no protection, promise them marriage, then sell them to establishments in mining towns." His voice went flat. "By the time I figured out what happened and went after them, it was too late. Found her in a place outside Sacramento. She'd tried to escape, and they made an example of her." "Oh, Weston, I'm so sorry." "Buried her under an oak tree on a hill. She always loved trees." He stirred the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. "Wade disappeared before I could find him, but I've made it my business since then to interfere with men in his line of work. Brenner, Langford, they're all the same type. They see women as commodity, not people." Now she understood the fury in his eyes when he'd faced down Brenner, the cold certainty in his voice. This wasn't just a rescue, it was redemption, or an attempt at it. "How long ago?" she asked gently. 8 years. Sarah would have been 23 now. Probably married with babies of her own if I'd been a better brother. You can't blame yourself for what evil men do." His laugh was bitter. "Can't I? I left her alone. I was supposed to protect her." Evelyn sat up, moved by an impulse she didn't fully understand. "You protected me. That has to count for something." "Maybe." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them in the firelight, an understanding, perhaps, or recognition of shared pain. "You should sleep now. We've got hard riding tomorrow." She lay back down, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Above, stars filled the desert sky like scattered diamonds. She'd never seen so many, never known the night could be so vast and bright. "Weston," she said drowsily. Thank you for telling me, for saving me, for everything. Go to sleep, Evelyn." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it, protective, almost tender, made her feel safer than she had all day. She closed her eyes, listening to the fire crackle and the soft sounds of him moving about the camp. Tomorrow she'd have to face her family, explain what had happened, return to her life and her wedding plans. But tonight, under a canopy of stars, wearing a stranger's clothes and protected by a man haunted by his own failures, she felt strangely free. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Weston sitting by the fire, his rifle across his knees, keeping watch over her as he'd once failed to do for another. And somehow, in that moment, Evelyn Mercer knew that her life had just taken a turn she could never have imagined when she'd put on her wedding dress that morning. Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee and the soft light of dawn painting the canyon walls pink and gold. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, the hard ground beneath her, the unfamiliar clothes, the vast sky above. Then memory rushed back, and she sat up quickly, looking for Weston. He stood by the rebuilt fire, a battered coffee pot balanced on the coals. His back was to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand never strayed far from his gun. He'd kept watch all night. She realized. "Morning," he said without turning. "Coffee's almost ready." "You should have woken me to take a turn at watch." That made him look back, one eyebrow raised. "You know how to spot riders in the dark? How to tell the difference between a coyote and a man trying to sound like one?" "No, but then you sleeping was the best help you could give." He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "We'll eat quick and move out. Want to cover ground before the heat gets bad." The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but Evelyn drank it gratefully. Her body ached from sleeping on the ground, and she could only imagine how she looked hair-tangled, face unwashed, wearing men's clothes that hung on her like grain sacks. "There's a pool just beyond those rocks," Weston said, seeming to read her thoughts. "Fed by the spring. You've got time to wash up if you like." The pool was small but clear, hidden behind a cluster of boulders. Evelyn knelt beside it, splashing cold water on her face and trying to finger-comb her hair into some semblance of order. She stared at her reflection, barely recognizable as the bride who'd stood before her mirror yesterday morning. When she returned, Weston had already saddled Sovereign and packed their few supplies. He handed her more jerky and a hard biscuit. "Not exactly wedding breakfast fare," he said dryly. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it. After yesterday's terror, simple food and relative safety felt like luxury. They mounted up as the sun cleared the canyon rim. Evelyn once again settling behind him on the black horse. Today felt different, less desperate flight, more purposeful journey. She found herself noticing things she'd missed yesterday, the way Weston constantly scanned their surroundings, how he chose paths that kept them hidden from view, the careful way he managed his horse's energy. "How far to Cypress Hollow?" she asked as they navigated a particularly narrow stretch of trail. "If we push hard, we could make it by nightfall, but that's if we don't run into trouble." "You think Brenner might—" "Not Brenner, but Langford's got a long reach. He's got men throughout this territory. Word travels fast out here." They rode in silence for a while, the canyon gradually opening up into broader valleys dotted with sage and mesquite. The sun climbed higher, and heat began to shimmer off the rocks. Evelyn was grateful for the hat Weston had given her, another piece of his clothing she'd borrowed. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horse in the shade of a large cottonwood. A small creek ran nearby, and Weston led Sovereign to drink while Evelyn stretched her cramped muscles. "Can I ask you something?" she said when he returned. He shrugged, which she took as permission. "Last night, you said you'd been tracking men like Brenner for 8 years. Is that all you do, hunt down kidnappers and slavers?" "Among other things." He checked his rifle, a habit she'd noticed he repeated frequently. "I hire out my gun sometimes, ride security for freight companies, track down horse thieves. Whatever pays and doesn't turn my stomach. A gunfighter, if you want to call it that. And you never thought about settling down, finding a different life?" His laugh was humorless. "With my reputation, what town would have me? What woman would want a man who sent dozens to their graves? You saved those women, saved me. That has to balance the scales somewhat." "There ain't no scales. Evelyn, there's just what a man's done and what he's got to live with." He looked at her then, something soft flickering in those storm-gray eyes. "You'll go back to your life, marry your James Morrison, have babies and tea parties and whatever else proper ladies do. You'll forget this ever happened. That's how it should be." "I won't forget," she said quietly. He turned away. "You will. Trust me." They were preparing to mount up again when Weston suddenly went still, his head cocked like a hunting dog's. "What is—" He pressed a finger to her lips, silencing her. Then she heard it, 2 horses, several of them, moving fast through the brush to their east. Without a word, Weston grabbed Sovereign's reins and led them quickly into a thicket of salt cedar. The branches were thick enough to hide them, but thin enough to see through. Evelyn's heart hammered as the hoofbeats grew louder. 4 riders appeared, following the creek, hard-looking men with guns worn low and eyes that missed nothing. They pulled up not 30 feet from where Evelyn and Weston crouched. "Trail's cold," one of them said. "If they came this way, it was hours ago." "Langford ain't paying us to give up," another replied. He was older, with silver in his beard and a scar across his throat. "The girl's worth a fortune to him. Some kind of business deal tied up with her daddy's bank." Evelyn felt Weston's hand on her arm, steady and reassuring. What about the man who took her? Brenner said it was Weston Hale. The scarred man spat. If it is Hale, we'd best be careful. Man's got a reputation. Took down 3 of the Murphy gang single-handed last year. He's just one man. One man who's put more killers in the ground than smallpox. But yeah, he's just one man. And there's 4 of us, with more coming if needed. They watered their horses and rode on, heading north. Weston waited a full 10 minutes before moving, even then keeping his voice to a whisper. They're headed for Dead Horse Pass. Figured we'd take the direct route. He helped her mount, swinging up behind her this time. We'll go west, loop around through the Badlands. Harder riding but less chance of meeting them. The Badlands lived up to their name. The terrain was a maze of arroyos and washouts, bare rock and sliding shale. Sovereign picked his way carefully, but several times Evelyn was certain they'd tumble into a ravine. Weston rode with complete confidence, though as if he'd traveled these paths before. The sun was brutal now, beating down from a cloudless sky. Evelyn's borrowed shirt stuck to her back with sweat. She tried to imagine what her mother would say if she could see her now dressed like a man, fleeing through the wilderness with a gunfighter. The thought almost made her laugh, though it came out more like a sob. "Are you all right?" Weston asked. "Yes, this isn't how I imagined my wedding day ending. Could have ended worse." True. She thought of Langford, this man she'd never met who apparently saw her as property to be acquired. Those men said something about a business deal with my father's bank. Men like Langford always got schemes running. Maybe he figured marrying the banker's daughter would give him leverage, or maybe he just wanted you. Either way, don't matter now. They created a rise, and Weston pulled up short. Below them stretched a valley, and in the distance, Evelyn could see smoke from chimneys. Civilization. "That's Miller's Station," Weston said. "Last stop before Cypress Hollow. We'll swing wide around it." But wouldn't it be safer in town with people around? "Langford's got people everywhere. Hotel clerks, bartenders, stable boys, anybody who might earn $1 passing information. We stay clear of towns until I get you home." The descent into the valley was treacherous. Twice Sovereign lost his footing on loose rock, and only Weston's skilled handling kept them upright. By the time they reached level ground, the sun was beginning its decline toward the western mountains. They stopped briefly at a small spring to refill the canteens and let Sovereign rest. Evelyn splashed water on her face, trying to cool down. When she looked up, she found Weston watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "What?" "Nothing, just, you're tougher than you look." What did you expect, tears and vapors? Most ladies would have been crying for their maids by now. You haven't complained once. Would complaining change anything? No, but that don't stop most people. She stood, brushing dust from her borrowed trousers. "I may be a banker's daughter, Mr. Hale, but I'm not made of spun sugar. We've had hard times too. Drought that killed half our cattle when I was 12, scarlet fever that took my little brother. You learned to endure." "I'm sorry, about your brother." "It was a long time ago." She looked away, remembering small hands in hers, a sweet voice asking for one more story. "His name was Thomas. He was 6. They mounted up again, the moment of connection passing as quickly as it had come. The land opened up, now rolling hills covered with yellow grass, dotted with oak and pine. In the distance, Evelyn could see familiar landmarks. They were getting close to home. "When we get there," Weston said, "I'll take you straight to your father's house. Let him know you're safe. After that, you'll leave." It wasn't a question. "Job's done. You'll be back where you belong. And if Langford sends more men, your daddy's got money. He can hire protection. Besides, once word gets out that the kidnapping failed, Langford might cut his losses. Bad for business, drawing too much attention." They rode through the afternoon. the familiar landscape making Evelyn's chest tight with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted desperately to be home, safe in her own bed, this nightmare behind her. But another part, a part that surprised her, dreaded the return to her ordinary life. As the sun touched the horizon, they crested a final hill, and there it was, Cypress Hollow, its buildings glowing golden in the late light, church steeples in the bank's brick facade, the general store with Morrison painted in large letters across its front. Home. "We'll wait for full dark," Weston said, guiding Sovereign into a grove of oaks. "Less chance of being spotted." They dismounted, and Evelyn realized this was likely the last time she'd stand beside him like this. Two dusty travelers sharing an adventure. Tomorrow she'd be Miss Mercer again, the banker's daughter, the almost bride. This strange, intense interlude would end. "Weston," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. "You should probably start calling me Mr. Hale again," he said quietly. "Wouldn't do for people to think what that the man who saved my life became my friend." "We ain't friends, Evelyn. We're just two people whose paths crossed for a bit. Tomorrow you'll go back to your world, and I'll go back to mine." The finality in his voice stung more than it should have. "And what if I don't want to go back? What if this whole experience has shown me that my world is smaller than I thought?" He turned to face her fully, and in the dying light, she could see pain etched in every line of his face. "You're scared and grateful and confused. That's natural, but don't mistake that for something else. You've got a good life waiting for you, a man who loves you, a family that needs you. Don't throw that away for whatever you think this is." "You don't know what I think." "No, but I know what happens to women who run off with gunfighters. And it ain't the fairy tales they tell in those books." Before she could respond, he'd turned away, focusing on checking his weapons and preparing for the final leg of their journey. The wall between them, which had been crumbling all day, was suddenly back in place, solid as stone. The first stars were appearing when they heard it, the thunder of hooves, coming fast from the east. Weston's hand went immediately to his gun as he pulled Evelyn behind the thick trunk of an oak. "Could be anybody," she whispered, but the tension in his shoulders told her he didn't believe that any more than she did. Through the gathering darkness, they saw them 6 riders, moving with purpose toward the town. Even in the poor light, Evelyn could make out the silver-bearded man from earlier. "Langford's men," Weston confirmed. "They're heading for your father's house." "How do you know?" "Because that's what I do. Figure you'll show up there eventually, or pressure your family for information." He was already moving, leading Sovereign deeper into the trees. "Change of plans. We can't ride straight in now." They skirted the edge of town, keeping to the shadows. Evelyn's heart ached at the familiar sights misses. Patterson's boarding house, the schoolhouse where she'd learned her letters, the church where she should have been married by now. Everything looked the same, but she felt irrevocably changed. Weston led them to a small stable on the outskirts of town, owned by old Samuel Briggs, who did odd jobs and asked few questions. A coin pressed into his palm ensured his silence and a safe place for Sovereign. "Your house has a back entrance through the garden, doesn't it?" Weston asked as they crept through the darkened streets. "Yes, but it's usually locked." "You still keep the spare key under the 3rd stepping stone." She stared at him. "How could you possibly know that?" "I spent the morning your wedding asking questions. Remember, your housemaid Mary likes to talk when she's worried." They approached the Mercer house from the rear, through the alley that ran behind the finest homes in Cypress Hollow. The garden gate creaked softly as they entered, and Evelyn felt a wave of emotion at the sight of her mother's roses, pale blooms ghostly in the moonlight. True to his word, Weston found the key exactly where it had always been hidden. The back door opened into the mudroom, then the kitchen. The house was strangely quiet, no servants bustling about, no clatter of dishes. "Evelyn." The voice made them both freeze. Then a figure appeared in the doorway. Her mother, still in her dressing gown, her face drawn with worry. "Mama," Evelyn breathed. And then she was in her mother's arms, both of them crying. "My baby, my sweet girl." "We thought the note said," Margaret Mercer pulled back, holding her daughter's face in her hands. "Are you hurt, are you?" She stopped, taking in Evelyn's appearance, the men's clothing, the armed stranger standing quietly in her kitchen. "I'm fine. Mama, this is Mr. Hale. He saved me. I was taken, kidnapped from the church, but he brought me home." Her mother's eyes widened, darting between them. Kidnapped, but the note was a forgery. "Where's Papa?" "In his study with Sheriff Watson and James. They've been searching everywhere. Half the town is out looking for you." She seemed to gather herself. Years of being a proper hostess taking over even in crisis. "Mr. Hale, I owe you a debt I can never repay." "No debt, ma'am. Just did what needed doing." "Mama, there are men in town," Evelyn said urgently. "Dangerous men, looking for me. They work for a man named Langford who—" The front door burst open with a crash that shook the house. Bootsteps thundered in the entry hall, and rough voices shouted commands. "Backstairs," Margaret whispered, but it was too late. The kitchen door flew open, and 3 men entered, guns drawn. The silver-bearded leader smiled coldly at the sight of Evelyn. Well, saved us the trouble of searching. Mr. Langford will be pleased." Weston moved so fast Evelyn barely saw it. His gun cleared leather and spoke twice, sending 2 men stumbling backward. But the third man, Silverbeard, was already moving, grabbing Margaret and pressing his pistol to her temple. "Drop it, Hale, or I decorate the wall with her brains." Weston held perfectly still, his gun still aimed but not firing. "Let her go. Your business is with the girl, not her mother." "My business is whatever I say it is." The man's arm tightened around Margaret's throat. "Now drop the iron, or I start counting. 1. "Weston, please," Evelyn begged. 2. Footsteps pounded overhead. Andrew Mercer's voice called out, "Margaret, what's happening down there?" 3. Weston's gun hit the floor with a clatter. Silverbeard smiled, victorious. "Smart man. Now, Miss Mercer, you're going to come with us nice and quiet, or your mama's going to have a real bad evening." "No?" Evelyn stepped forward. "I'll come. Just don't hurt her." "Evelyn, no!" Margaret struggled against her captor's grip. "It's all right, Mama." Evelyn kept her voice steady, though terror clawed at her insides. "These men just want to talk. Isn't that right?" "That's right, Miss. Just a friendly conversation with Mr. Langford." Silverbeard began backing toward the door, dragging Margaret with him. "Hale, you stay right where you are. Try to follow, and I'll—" The kitchen window exploded in a shower of glass. Silverbeard jerked, his gun falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. Margaret broke free as he collapsed, revealing Sheriff Watson in the window frame, smoking rifle in hand. "Everybody all right in there?" the sheriff called. What followed was chaos. Andrew Mercer and James Morrison rushed in from the front hall. More townsmen appeared at the windows and doors, the search party, drawn by the gunfire. The 2 wounded kidnappers were quickly subdued and dragged away. Through it all, Evelyn found herself looking for Weston. He'd retrieved his gun and faded back into the shadows, watching the proceedings with wary eyes. When their gazes met across the crowded kitchen, something passed between them: relief, understanding, and something deeper that made her chest tight. Then James was there, pulling her into his arms. "Evelyn, thank God when we got that note. I thought we all thought—" "I'm fine. James, really." She pulled back gently, aware of how different he felt after 2 days in Weston's company. James was soft where Weston was hard, polished where Weston was rough. His hands had never known violence, had never cut a woman free from bondage or kept watch through a long desert night. "Your clothes," James said, his face reddening as he took in her appearance. "What happened to your dress?" "It's a long story." Andrew Mercer pushed through the crowd to embrace his daughter. "My dear girl, we've been sick with worry. That note, it seems so real. Your handwriting." "I know, Papa, but I would never leave like that. You must have known." "I hoped, I prayed, but when hours passed with no word..." His voice broke. Sheriff Watson began clearing the room, sending the townsmen home with thanks for their help. "I'll need statements from everyone," he said, "but that can wait until morning. Miss Mercer needs rest." "And Mr. Hale needs rewarding," Andrews said, looking around. "Where is the man who saved my daughter?" But Weston had vanished, slipping away in the confusion as quietly as he'd entered their lives. "He was just here," Evelyn said, moving toward the door. "He can't have gone far." "Let him go," James said, catching her arm. "Men like that don't stick around for thank yous. Probably already planning how to spend the reward money." "He didn't do it for money." The words came out sharper than intended. James's eyes narrowed. "You seem to know him well for such a short acquaintance." "He saved my life. We traveled together for 2 days. Yes, I know him well enough to say he's not motivated by money." "Traveled together. Alone." James's tone had changed, become careful and cold. "Perhaps you should tell us exactly what happened. Evelyn." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too crowded. Everyone was looking at her parents with concern, James with growing suspicion, the sheriff with professional interest. "I was taken from the church," she began, sinking into a chair. "3 men, they said I'd been sold to someone named Theodore Langford in Silver Ridge. They had a wagon, ropes." She told the story simply, leaving out nothing important but also carefully omitting the moments of connection, the shared confidences by firelight, the way she'd felt safe despite everything when Weston was near. When she finished, the room was silent. Then James spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "You spent 2 nights in the wilderness with this gunfighter, wearing his clothes, sharing his provisions." "James Morrison," Margaret said sharply. "My daughter was kidnapped and very nearly sold into slavery. A brave man risked his life to save her. If you're suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," James said quickly. "I'm simply concerned about how this will appear. What people will say." "What people will say." Evelyn stood slowly, exhaustion and anger warring in her chest. "I was kidnapped on our wedding day, and you're worried about gossip." "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She faced him fully, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. "Are you asking if my virtue is intact, if I'm still pure enough to be your wife?" "Evelyn," her mother gasped. "No, Mama, I want to know, is that what matters most here? Not that I'm alive, not that I'm safe, but whether I'm still acceptable." James's face flushed dark red. "You're twisting my words. Of course I'm glad you're safe, but you must understand, spending 2 days unchaperoned with a man of his reputation. His reputation is that of a man who saves women from slavery," Evelyn said quietly, "which is more than can be said for men who worry more about appearances than truth." The silence that followed was deafening. James opened his mouth, closed it, then turned on his heel and left. The front door slammed behind him. "Oh, Evelyn," her mother sighed. "I'm sorry, Mama. I know I shouldn't have—" "No, dear, you said what needed saying." Andrew Mercer put his arm around his daughter. "James is a good man, but sometimes good men are more concerned with what's proper than what's right. He'll come around." "I don't think I want him to," Evelyn admitted, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. "I can't marry someone who'd question my honor after what I've been through." Sheriff Watson cleared his throat. "I'll need to track down this Langford fellow, and I'd like to speak with Hale. Get his side of things. Any idea where he might have gone?" "Try the Briggs stable," Evelyn said, "His horse is there." But when the sheriff returned an hour later, it was with news that both horse and rider had vanished into the night. All that remained was a note, left with old Samuel. "Keep the gold piece. Take care of her. W.H." Evelyn stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the moonlit garden where just hours ago she'd crept home like a thief. Somewhere out there, Weston Hale was riding alone through the darkness, back to his solitary life of violence and redemption. She pressed her hand against the glass, remembering his rare smiles, the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his sister, the gentle way he'd helped her from the horse despite his rough demeanor. In 2 days, he'd shown her more of life's harsh realities and more genuine kindness than she'd experienced in 21 years of sheltered existence. Her wedding dress lay across a chair, dirty and torn beyond repair. Tomorrow there would be questions, scandals, decisions to make about her future. But tonight, she simply stood at the window and watched the stars, wondering if he was looking at them too, and if he'd remember the banker's daughter who'd worn his clothes and shared his fire, just as she'd never forget the gunfighter who'd given her back her life and perhaps shown her who she really was. The days following Evelyn's return blurred together in a haze of questions, whispers, and careful social navigation. Sheriff Watson had arrested the surviving kidnappers and sent word to the authorities in Silver Ridge about Theodore Langford. But the man himself had vanished, his ranch abandoned overnight. The scandal-rocked Cypress Hollow kidnapping was rare enough, but the attempted sale of the banker's daughter was unprecedented. James had not returned. His mother had called, expressing concern and disappointment in equal measure. But James himself remained silent. The wedding gifts sat unopened in the parlor, monuments to a future that no longer existed. "You're better off without him," Margaret Mercer said one afternoon, finding her daughter staring out the window again. It had become a habit watching the horizon as if someone might appear there. "I know, Mama, it's not James I'm thinking about." Her mother settled beside her, following her gaze. "The gunfighter." "Weston. His name is Weston Hale." "You care for him?" It wasn't a question. Evelyn sighed, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. "How can you care for someone you've known for 2 days? It doesn't make sense." "The heart rarely does. Your father and I met at a church social and were engaged within a month. Sometimes you just know." "But Mama, he's killed men. He lives by violence. He drifts from town to town with nothing but a horse and gun." "And he saved your life at risk of his own. He treated you with respect when he could have taken advantage. He walked away without asking for reward or recognition." Margaret touched her daughter's hand. "Actions speak louder than occupations, my dear." A week passed. The talk died down somewhat, though Evelyn still felt eyes on her whenever she ventured into town. Some looked with pity, others with suspicion, wondering what had really happened during those 2 days in the wilderness. She held her head high and spoke to no one about it. Then one evening, as she sat reading in the garden, she heard the distinctive sound of spurs on the garden path. Her heart leaped, then sank as Sheriff Watson appeared around the rose bushes. "Evening, Miss Mercer. Sorry to disturb." "Not at all. Sheriff, is there news?" "Of a sort." He settled his bulk onto the garden bench. "Got word from Silver Ridge. Seems Langford was into more than just kidnapping. The man was running guns to raiders, using his ranch as a cover. Federal marshals are hunting him now." "I see. Thing is, they found records at his place, lists of transactions. Your name wasn't the only one on there. Apparently, he'd done this before, bringing in brides for men who couldn't find willing women." Evelyn's stomach turned. Those poor girls. Most were found and freed, but it got me thinking about your rescuer, Weston Hale. The sheriff pulled out a worn notebook. "I've been asking around, sending telegrams. Interesting fellow. You're Mr. Hale." "He's not my what did you learn. Been tracking men like Langford for 8 years, like he told you. But here's the interesting part, he's never taken a reward. Not once. refuses payment from the families, disappears before they can press money on him. The only money he takes is what he earns from legitimate work between rescues. Evelyn thought of the gold piece he'd left for her care, probably a significant portion of his funds. He told me about his sister, Sarah. Ah, that explains it then. Watson closed his notebook. Man trying to balance the scales. Can't save his sister, so he saves everyone else's. Do you know where he is? The sheriff studied her carefully. Might have heard something about a man matching his description taking a job riding security for a freight company. Omaha and Western outfit, heading through the Nebraska territory. That's hundreds of miles from here. Yes, miss, it is. He stood, adjusting his gun belt. Of course, the Omaha and Western happens to run a supply station about 3 days' ride north, place called Willow Creek. They hire on extra hands there sometimes, for the dangerous runs through Indian country. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Sheriff Watson, are you... I'm not suggesting anything. Miss Mercer, just sharing information. What you do with it is your business. He touched his hat. Evening to you. That night, Evelyn lay awake planning. It was madness. What she was considering. A proper lady didn't chase after gunfighters. A banker's daughter didn't throw away her life for a man she'd known 2 days. But then she remembered his eyes in the firelight, the way he'd cut her bonds so carefully, his voice breaking when he spoke of his sister. She remembered feeling more alive during those 2 dangerous days than in 21 safe years. By morning, her mind was made up. The argument with her parents was fierce but brief. Andrew Mercer, to his credit, listened to his daughter's plan with surprising calm. You're going after him, he said finally. Yes. To what end to thank him, to offer reward? To see... Evelyn met his eyes steadily. To see if what I felt was real or just gratitude in circumstances. To see if there's something there worth pursuing. And if there isn't, then I'll come home and marry whoever you choose and be a dutiful daughter for the rest of my days. And if there is? Evelyn had no answer for that. In the end, it was her mother who swayed the decision. Let her go, Andrew. She'll wonder forever if she doesn't. Better to know than to spend a lifetime questioning. They compromised. Evelyn would travel by stage to Willow Creek, accompanied by Mary, her maid, and Tom Rodriguez, one of her father's most trusted men. She would stay at the respectable boarding house, make her inquiries discreetly, and return within 2 weeks regardless of the outcome. The journey took 4 days by stage, through country that grew wilder with each mile. Mary complained constantly about the dust and discomfort, while Tom rode up top with the driver, rifle at ready. Evelyn barely noticed the hardships. Her mind focused on what lay ahead. Willow Creek proved to be a rough settlement built around the Omaha and Western supply depot. The boarding house was clean but basic, run by a widow named Mrs. Clearwater, who asked no questions as long as the rent was paid in advance. Finding information about Weston proved easier than expected. The gunfighter's reputation preceded him, and the freight company clerks were happy to talk about their famous temporary employee. Hale, sure, he's here, a young clerk told her. Riding security on the morning run to Fort Calloway. Dangerous route been hit by raiders twice this month. Company pays triple wages for men willing to ride it. When does he return? If all goes well, 3 days. If not, the clerk shrugged eloquently. 3 days. Evelyn settled in to wait, spending her time walking the small town, reading in her room, and trying not to think about what she'd say when she saw him. On the second night, she woke to gunfire. The boarding house erupted in chaos as guests rushed to windows. Outside, she could see flames lighting the sky. Raiders! Someone shouted. They hit the freight wagons coming in. Evelyn's blood went cold. She threw a shawl over her nightgown and rushed downstairs. Pushing through the crowd gathering in the street, the supply depot was in chaos. Men running with buckets, trying to save what they could from the burning wagons. "The security riders," she grabbed a passing clerk. "What happened to the guards?" "2 dead for sure. Others are at the doc's place." He pulled free, rushing to help with the fire. The doctor's office was a small building behind the general store. Evelyn burst through the door to find controlled bedlam, wounded men on every surface. The doctor and his assistant moving between them with grim efficiency. "You can't be here, miss," the assistant said, trying to usher her out. "I'm looking for Weston Hale. Is he—" "Evelyn." She spun toward the voice. Weston sat on a wooden chair in the corner, his left arm in a makeshift sling, blood staining his shirt. Alive. Battered but alive. "What are you doing here?" He struggled to stand, wincing. "Sit down, you fool." She rushed to him, pressing him back into the chair. "How bad is it?" "Bullet grazed my shoulder. I've had worse." His gray eyes searched her face. "Evelyn, why are you here?" "I came to find you." "That's a damn fool thing to do." "Yes, well, apparently I'm a damn fool." She knelt beside his chair, not caring who saw. "I couldn't just let you disappear, not without knowing." "Knowing what?" His voice was rough. "If you felt it too, those 2 days, the connection, or if it was just me being a silly girl." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his good hand came up, fingers gentle against her cheek. "I've thought about you every mile since I left. Wondered if you were safe, if that James fellow came to his senses. Told myself I did the right thing. Leaving. A woman like you don't need a man like me complicating your life." "What if I want my life complicated?" "You don't know what you're asking. I've got nothing to offer. No home, no prospects, just a gun and a lot of ghosts. You have yourself. That's enough." "Is it? What happens when the next kidnapped girl needs saving? When I ride off and you don't know if I'm coming back, you want to be the doctor's widow, patching up bullet wounds in the middle of the night." "I want the chance to try." She covered his hand with hers. "I'm not asking for promises. Weston, I'm asking for possibilities, for time to know each other without kidnapping and gunfights, for a chance to see what this is." He studied her face, and she saw the war in his eyes, hope battling caution, desire fighting duty. "Your parents know I'm here. They're not happy, but they understand I need to do this." "And if it doesn't work, if you realize I'm just a violent man with too much blood on his hands?" "Then at least we'll know. No wondering, no what-ifs." She stood, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the scene, her in nightclothes in a doctor's office full of wounded men. "I'm staying at Mrs. Clearwater's boarding house. When you're patched up, if you want to explore those possibilities, you know where to find me." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Evelyn." When she looked back, he was smiling, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "I'm glad you're a damn fool." The next morning brought a soft knock at Evelyn's door. Mary answered, her disapproval evident as she announced, "That gunfighter is here. Miss says you're expecting him." Weston stood in Mrs. Clearwater's modest parlor, hat in hand, his left arm still in a sling but looking considerably better than the night before. He'd shaved, found clean clothes, and made an effort at taming his dark hair. The sight of him trying to appear respectable touched something deep in Evelyn's chest. "Mr. Hale," she said formally, aware of Mary's hovering presence. "I'm glad to see you're recovering." "Miss Mercer." He shifted awkwardly. "I was wondering if you might, that is, if you'd care to walk with me. The doc says I need to keep the arm moving." It was a transparent excuse, but Evelyn accepted it gratefully. "Mary, Mr. Hale and I will be walking on Main Street, in full view of everyone. I'm sure that will be acceptable." Mary sniffed, but couldn't argue with the propriety of a public walk. Outside, the morning sun was already warming the dusty street. They walked slowly, Weston favoring his injured side. For a while, neither spoke. the silence stretching between them like a question. "I'm no good at this," he said finally. "At what?" "Courting. If that's what this is, I know how to track outlaws and shoot straight and read trail sign. But walking with a lady, making conversation?" He shook his head. "Might as well ask me to speak Chinese." "Then don't court me," Evelyn said. "Just talk to me, like you did by the campfire." That was different. We were running for our lives. Were we? I remember feeling safer with you than I've ever felt in my parlor at home. They paused at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "Tell me about your life," she said. "Not the gunfighting, the other parts. Where did you grow up? What was your family like?" Slowly, hesitantly, he began to talk. About a small farm in Missouri, a father who died when he was 12, a mother who followed 2 years later. About trying to keep the farm going, him and Sarah alone against the world. About the drought that killed their crops and the banker who took their land. "That's when I learned to use a gun," he said. "Hired on with a cattle drive. Figured I'd earn enough to start over, but I was young and angry. Got into fights, got a reputation. One thing led to another. And Sarah stayed with a family in town while I was gone. Good people, or so I thought. They introduced her to Wade." His jaw tightened. "I should have taken her with me, should have found another way." "You were trying to provide for her. You couldn't have known." "Couldn't I? I knew the world was full of evil men. I'd already started putting them in the ground." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "This is who I am. Evelyn. A man who solves problems with violence, who spent 8 years seeking vengeance for a sister I failed to protect. Is that really what you want?" "I want the man who didn't have to stop for a kidnapped woman, but did. Who gave up his gold piece to ensure I was cared for. Who kept watch all night to keep me safe." She reached out, touched his good arm. "I want the man who still grieves his sister, who can't walk away from injustice even when it would be easier. That's the Weston Hale I came to find." Something shifted in his eyes, a wall crumbling. "I don't know how to be anything else." "I'm not asking you to be, but maybe there's room in your life for more than just the hunting. Maybe there could be something to come home to." "Home." He said the word like it was foreign. "I haven't had one of those in a long time." They resumed walking, turning back toward town. People stared as they passed the banker's daughter and the notorious gunfighter. An unlikely pair if ever there was one. But Evelyn found she didn't care. Let them look. Let them talk. "There's something else," Weston said as they neared the boarding house. "About my work. The freight company offered me a permanent position. Head of security for this region. It would mean staying in one place. More or less. Regular pay. A chance at a normal life. As normal as it gets for someone like me. I'd still be dealing with outlaws and raiders. Still be dangerous, but it's something." "Are you going to take it?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "Depends." "On what?" "On whether I have a reason to stay in one place." The implication hung between them, fragile as spun glass. Before Evelyn could respond, a commotion erupted from the telegraph office. People began running, shouting. The clerk burst out, waving a paper. "Cavalry's coming regiment from Fort Calloway. They caught them raiders that hit the freight wagons." The crowd surged toward the edge of town to watch the approaching dust cloud. Evelyn and Weston were swept along, ending up near the front as the cavalry column appeared. Blue uniforms dusty, horses lathered, but riding proud with their prisoners in tow. Hale, the captain, spotting Weston, rode over. "Glad to see you made it. Your information about their camp was dead on. Caught the whole bunch." "Just doing my job, Captain." "Well, the Omaha and Western is mighty grateful. So's the Army. These boys have been raising hell for months." He leaned down, lowered his voice. "There's talk of a commendation, maybe a reward." "Don't want it," Weston said automatically. Give it to the families of the men who died." The captain shook his head, smiling. "You're an odd one, Hale, but a good man to have in a fight." He touched his hat brim to Evelyn. "Ma'am." As the cavalry moved on toward the fort, Evelyn turned to Weston. "You gave them information about the raiders' camp. Tracked them after the fight. Couldn't go after them myself with this shoulder, but I could make sure someone did. Even wounded, you couldn't let it go. Those men killed 2 guards, good men with families. Someone had to make it right." She studied him, this complex man who lived by violence but served justice, who claimed to have nothing to offer but gave everything he had to strangers in need. "Take the job," she said suddenly. "What?" "The freight company position. Take it. Stay." "Evelyn, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I also know I've never felt as alive as I did during those 2 days with you. And I know that when I thought you might be dead last night, it felt like the world was ending." She took a breath, plunged ahead. "I'm not saying we should marry tomorrow. I'm saying give us a chance. Stay in Willow Creek. Let me stay too. Let's see what this is when we're not running for our lives." "Your parents." "We'll have to accept it. I'm of age. I have money of my own from my grandmother. I can rent a room here, maybe help at the school. They need teachers. We can court properly, or as properly as possible given the circumstances. You'd give up your life in Cypress Hollow, your comfortable home, your place in society. I'd give up a life that was chosen for me, for one I choose myself." She stepped closer. "The question is, are you brave enough to try you face down outlaws without blinking? Can you face the possibility of happiness?" He was quiet for a long moment, and she could see the battle in his eyes again. Then, slowly, he smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made her heart skip. "Sarah would have liked you," he said softly. "She always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Said someday I'd meet a woman who wouldn't let me walk away." "Was she right?" "Yeah." He reached out with his good hand, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, she was right." They stood there on Main Street, surrounded by curious townspeople and dust and the ordinary bustle of life. It wasn't romantic in any traditional sense, no moonlight, no flowers, no pretty words. But when Weston Hale looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting, not because she was weak, but because she was valuable, Evelyn knew she'd made the right choice. "So you'll take the job?" she asked. "I'll take the job. And you'll stay?" "I'll stay. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Mary appeared at her elbow, radiating disapproval. "Miss Evelyn, it's not proper to be standing so close in public. What would your mother say?" "She'd say that propriety is less important than purpose," Evelyn replied, not moving away. "And that a woman must sometimes make her own path." Mary glared at Weston. "And I suppose you think you're going to court her properly, a gunfighter courting a lady?" "No, ma'am," Weston said seriously. "But I'm going to try to become the kind of man who deserves to—" That seemed to take some of the wind from Mary's sails. She sniffed, looked between them, then sighed. "Well, I suppose if Miss Evelyn's made up her mind, there's no changing it. Stubborn as her father. She is." As they walked back to the boarding house, Evelyn felt a lightness she hadn't experienced since before her wedding day. No, if she was honest, long before that. The future was uncertain, unconventional, potentially scandalous. Her mother's friends would gossip. James would tell everyone she'd lost her mind. But walking beside Weston Hale, watching him navigate this new territory of ordinary life with the same determined focus he'd brought to saving her, she knew she'd rather have uncertainty with him than safety with anyone else. That evening, she wrote to her parents, explaining her decision. The letter was long, honest, and probably shocking. She sealed it and gave it to Tom to deliver, along with instructions to bring back some of her things if her parents permitted. Then she sat at her window, watching the sun set over the prairie, and thought about paths not taken and roads that led to unexpected destinations. Somewhere out there, Theodore Langford was running from federal marshals. James Morrison was probably courting the Baker girl, and she was here in a rough frontier town, preparing to build a life with a gunfighter who was learning how to be more. 3 months had passed since Evelyn made her shocking decision to stay in Willow Creek. The scandal had rippled through Cypress Hollow society like a stone thrown in still water. But here on the frontier, she'd found an unexpected peace. The one-room schoolhouse where she taught 30 children of various ages had become her domain, and the simple boarding house room her sanctuary. Weston had taken to his new position with the freight company like a man discovering water after years in the desert. He'd rented a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy. Just 2 rooms and a porch, but he'd repaired it with his own hands, making it solid and safe. They'd fallen into a routine of evening walks, Sunday dinners at Mrs. Clearwater's, and careful, proper courtship that amused those who knew Weston's reputation. But now, standing at her window on a crisp October morning, Evelyn could see dust rising on the southern road. Tom Rodriguez was returning from Cypress Hollow, and her stomach knotted with apprehension. This would be his 3rd trip, bringing supplies and news from home. Each time, she hoped for reconciliation with her parents. Each time, the silence spoke volumes. "Miss Evelyn," one of her students, little Katie Morrison, no relation to James, thankfully, tugged at her skirt. "Are you going to stare out that window all day, or are we going to learn our numbers?" "Numbers, of course." Evelyn turned from the window, smiling at the eager faces. "Who can tell me what 7 times 8 equals?" The morning passed in the familiar rhythm of lessons and laughter. These children, sons and daughters of freight workers, store clerks, and ranchers, had accepted her without question. To them, she wasn't the scandalous banker's daughter who'd thrown away respectability. She was simply Miss Evelyn, who told wonderful stories and never rapped knuckles with her ruler. When the lunch bell rang and the children scattered, Evelyn saw Tom's wagon pulling up outside. Her heart hammered as she smoothed her simple calico dress, a far cry from the silks she'd once worn, and stepped onto the schoolhouse porch. "Miss Evelyn." Tom touched his hat, his weathered face giving nothing away. "Tom, how was the journey?" "Fair enough. Got your supplies. Some books you asked for." He paused, reached into his coat. "And this." A letter, her mother's handwriting. Evelyn's hands trembled as she took it. "They're well." "Well enough. Your father's been poorly, his heart's been acting up. Nothing serious, Doc says, but he's been told to slow down." "I should—" She stopped. She'd made her choice. "Thank you, Tom." "There's more." He gestured to the wagon. "Your mother sent some things. Said you'd understand." Curious, Evelyn approached the wagon. Under the practical supplies lay a trunk she recognized her grandmother's. The one that held— "My grandmother's wedding dress," she breathed. "Your mother said to tell you she's been altering it. Said it needed taking in some, and the style's old-fashioned, but the lace is still good." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. After months of silence, this gesture said everything. Her mother understood, perhaps even approved. "There's also a visitor," Tom said carefully. "Came along for the ride. Wanted to see for himself how you were doing." Her heart leaped. "Father—" "No, Miss—" Tom looked uncomfortable. "It's Mr. Morrison, James Morrison." As if summoned, James stepped down from the wagon's far side. He looked exactly as she remembered, neat, proper, every hair in place despite the long journey. His brown eyes took in her appearance with barely concealed shock. "Hello, Evelyn." "James." She kept her voice steady. "This is unexpected." "I needed to see for myself, to understand." He glanced around the rough town, his distaste evident. "May we speak privately?" She led him to the schoolhouse, acutely aware of the differences 3 months had wrought. Her hands, once soft and white, now bore the calluses of real work. Her expensive boots had been replaced with practical ones. Even her posture had changed, less rigid, more natural. "You look," James searched for words. "Different." "I am different. I can see that." He walked around the small classroom, taking in the handmade decorations, the carefully printed alphabet on the board. "You're actually teaching." "Did you think I was lying in my letters? I thought perhaps you were playing at it, like when you used to help at the church Sunday school." He turned to face her. "But this is real. Isn't it, this life you've chosen? Very real. And the gunfighter, you're still—" "His name is Weston, and yes, we're courting." She lifted her chin. "Properly. With a chaperone and everything society demands, though I doubt society would approve regardless. He's killed men, Evelyn. He's saved women, including me. You know that's not the same thing. Isn't it?" She moved to the window. Could see Weston's house from here. He'd be at the freight office now, organizing security for the week's shipments. "Tell me, James, what have you done with your life that matters? What difference have you made?" "I run a successful business. I provide for my family. I follow the law and contribute to society. You live the life laid out for you from birth, as I was supposed to." She turned back to him. "There's nothing wrong with that, James, but it's not enough for me. Not anymore." His face flushed. "So instead you choose this, a violent man in a frontier town, teaching farmers' children for pennies while living in a boarding house." "I choose purpose. I choose a man who sees me as myself, not as an ornament or an asset. I choose to make my own path." "And when he gets himself killed? When some outlaw or raider puts a bullet in him? What then?" The words hit like a physical blow. It was her greatest fear, the one that woke her some nights in a cold sweat. But she'd learned something in these 3 months. "Then I'll grieve, and I'll survive, because I'll have had something real, however briefly." She met his eyes. "Can you say the same? Do you love the baker girl, James, or is she just suitable?" He stiffened. "That's unfair." "Is it?" They stood in silence for a moment. Then James sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I loved you, in my way. I know, and I cared for you, but caring isn't enough. Not for a lifetime." "I suppose not." He moved toward the door, then paused. "He'd better be worth it, this gunfighter of yours. Worth everything you've given up." "He is." James studied her face, and something in her expression must have convinced him. He nodded slowly. "Then I wish you well. Evelyn, truly, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for out here." After he left, Evelyn sat at her desk, her mother's letter unopened in her hands. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, and she could hear children playing in the distance. Normal sounds of a normal day in her decidedly abnormal new life. The letter, when she finally opened it, was brief. Asterisk, my dearest daughter. Asterisk, your father forbids me to write, but a mother's heart knows no such commands. Tom tells us you are well, that you've taken to teaching, that your young man has steady employment. These are good things. Asterisk, I won't pretend to understand your choice, but I remember being young once. I remember the fire that burns for something more than what's expected. Your grandmother had it too. She scandalized society by marrying a man who worked with his hands. They were happy for 43 years. I've sent her dress. Perhaps it's presumptuous. But if you should need it, well, a mother hopes. Asterisk, your father's health worries me. His heart, the doctor says, though I think it's more that it's broken by your absence. He's stubborn, but he loves you, perhaps in time. Asterisk, be happy, my dear one. Be safe, and know that you are loved, even across the miles and misunderstandings. Asterisk, your devoted mother, asterisk. Evelyn was still wiping tears when she heard spurs on the porch. She looked up to find Weston in the doorway, concern creasing his brow. "Saw Morrison leaving. You all right?" "Yes, better than all right." She showed him the letter. "My mother sent my grandmother's wedding dress." Something flickered in his eyes. That's good. For someday." "Someday," she agreed, standing and moving to him. "How was your morning?" "Quiet. Got the schedules worked out for next week's runs." He paused. "There's talk of expanding the route north. They'd need someone to set up security for a new depot." "Oh, place called Pine Falls. Bigger town, growing fast with the railroad coming through." He wasn't quite meeting her eyes. "They offered me the position. More money. Bigger house comes with it. Good place to raise a family." Her breath caught. "Are you going to take it?" "It depends." "On what?" He finally looked at her, and she saw everything in his eyes: hope, fear, love, uncertainty. "On whether you'd come with me, as my wife." The schoolhouse seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I know it's not fancy," he continued, words coming faster now. "I can't offer you society parties or silk dresses, but I can offer you partnership, purpose, a life built together instead of handed to us, and I can promise you'll never doubt that you're loved, every single day." "Weston, I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, trying to find the right words." He pulled something from his pocket, a simple gold band, nothing like the elaborate diamond James had given her. "It was my mother's. Sarah saved it, had it with her when I found her. Maybe that's morbid, but—" "Yes?" He blinked. "What?" "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll go to Pine Falls. Yes to all of it." His face transformed with that rare, beautiful smile, with shaking hands. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "When?" he asked. She thought of the trunk in Tom's wagon, her grandmother's dress waiting patiently after all these years. "How about next month? Give my parents time to come if they will, but not so long that I lose my nerve." "You won't lose your nerve. You're the bravest person I know." "Brave or foolish?" "Maybe both. That's what I love about you." It was the first time he'd said the word love. She pulled him down for a kiss, not caring who might see through the windows. Let them talk. Let them scandalize. She'd found something worth more than reputation. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Weston rested his forehead against hers. "Sarah was right. You know, I was too stubborn for my own good. Thank you for not letting me walk away. Thank you for being worth chasing." They stood there in the little schoolhouse, surrounded by chalk dust and children's drawings, planning a future neither could have imagined 6 months ago. Outside, Willow Creek went about its business, unaware that the banker's daughter and the gunfighter had just taken another step toward their unlikely happy ending. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold, November frost painting the windows of the boarding house with delicate crystals. Evelyn stood before the mirror in her room, her grandmother's dress fitting as if it had been made for her. The ivory silk had aged to a soft cream, and her mother's careful alterations had transformed it from an 1850s style to something more current while preserving the exquisite handmade lace. "You look beautiful, Miss," Mary said, tears threatening. The loyal maid had stayed despite everything, claiming someone needed to keep Evelyn respectable even in the wilderness. "Do I?" Evelyn touched the simple pearl necklace at her throat, another grandmother heirloom sent by her mother. "I feel different than last time." "You are different, better different, if you ask me." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Mrs." Clearwater peered in, beaming. "There's someone here to see you. Dear, says he's come a long way." Evelyn's heart leaped. Could it be? Her father stood in the parlor, hat in hands, looking older than she remembered. His hair had gone completely gray, and new lines creased his face. But his eyes, when they met hers, were warm with love and perhaps understanding. "Papa, my little girl," his voice broke slightly. "You look just like your grandmother on her wedding day. She'd be so proud. You came. Did you think I'd miss walking my daughter down the aisle? Your mother sends her love and apologies. The journey would be too hard on her. But she made me promise to remember everything so I could tell her every detail." Evelyn flew into his arms, not caring about wrinkles or propriety. "I'm so glad you're here. I'm sorry it took me so long to accept your choice," he said into her hair. "Pride's a terrible thing in a father. But Tom's reports, your letters, you're happy here. That's all that matters." "I am happy, happier than I've ever been." He pulled back to study her face. "And this man of yours, he treats you well." "Like I'm precious cargo," she assured him, "but also like I'm strong enough to stand beside him. It's a good balance." "Then I suppose I'd better meet him properly, man to man." The wedding was to be simple, just a few friends at the small church that served Willow Creek and the surrounding ranches. But as Evelyn and her father walked through town, she realized the entire population had turned out. Store owners stood in their doorways. Women held children up to see, and even the rough freight workers had cleaned up for the occasion. "Seems you've made an impression," her father murmured. At the church, Weston waited by the altar, and Evelyn's breath caught at the sight of him. He'd traded his usual rough clothes for a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean height. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. But it was the look in his gray eyes when he saw her that made her heart race wonder, love, and a vulnerability she'd rarely seen. Sheriff Watson from Cypress Hollow had made the journey to stand as Weston's best man, while Mrs. Clearwater had volunteered as matron of honor. It was an unconventional wedding party, but it felt right. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Evelyn was aware of her father placing her hand in Weston's, of the minister's words about love and commitment, of Weston's voice strong and sure as he spoke his vows. When he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger properly this time, she saw his hands tremble slightly. "You may kiss your bride," the minister announced, and Weston cupped her face gently, as if she might break. "Mrs. Hale," he whispered, wonder in his voice, before kissing her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. The small reception at the boarding house was livelier than expected. Someone brought out a fiddle, and soon dancing had broken out in the parlor. Evelyn found herself passed from partner to partner Tom Rodriguez, Sheriff Watson, even some of her students' fathers who solemnly requested the honor. But it was the dance with her father that meant the most. "He loves you," Andrew Mercer said as they swayed to a slow waltz. "It's in every look, every gesture. That eases my mind considerably." "I love him too. Papa, I know it seems fast, that you probably think I'm being reckless. I think you're being yourself. Finally." He smiled. "Your mother and I, we tried to shape you into what we thought you should be, but you were always meant for something more than tea parties and social calls. I see that now." "I'll miss you, both of you." "Pine Falls isn't so far. Close enough to visit when grandchildren come along." "Papa," she blushed, but he just chuckled. "A father can hope." As the afternoon wore on, Evelyn noticed Weston had disappeared. She found him on the boarding house's back porch, staring out at the prairie. "Running away already?" she teased, joining him. "Never." He pulled her close, and she realized he was trembling slightly. "Just needed a moment. I never thought I'd have this, a wife, a real life, something beyond the next job and the next outlaw." "No regrets?" "No, God, no, just Sarah should be here. She always dreamed of weddings. Used to make me promise I'd dance at hers." His voice roughened. "I failed her, but somehow I still got this. Got you. Doesn't seem fair." Evelyn turned in his arms to face him fully. "You didn't fail her. Weston, what happened to Sarah was evil men doing evil things. You've spent 8 years making sure other women don't suffer her fate. She'd be proud of that. Proud of you. You think so? I know so. And I think she'd threaten to box your ears if she saw you moping at your own wedding reception. That surprised a laugh out of him. She would at that. She had a temper when riled. Then honor her by being happy. Dance with your wife. Build the life she'd want for you. He studied her face, then bent to kiss her softly. How did I get so lucky? Clean living and good behavior, obviously. Obviously? He grinned, the shadows leaving his eyes. Come on, Mrs. Hale. I believe I owe you a wedding dance. They rejoined the party to cheers and raised glasses. As Weston spun her around the small parlor, Evelyn caught glimpses of their future, the house in Pine Falls they'd make a home, the children who'd combine her stubborn streak with his protective nature, the life built on unlikely love and mutual respect. Her father left the next morning, pressing a bank draft into Weston's reluctant hands. Call it a wedding gift. Man needs capital to start fresh in a new town. Mr. Mercer, I can't. You can and you will. You saved my daughter. Gave her a life she chose for herself. That's worth more than money. But the money might help you keep her in the manner she deserves. I don't need manner, Evelyn protested. I need purpose. Then use it to create purpose. Start a business. Build something together. Andrew Mercer shook Weston's hand firmly. Take care of her. With my life. I believe you will. The week after the wedding passed quickly. There were arrangements to make, belongings to pack, goodbyes to say. Evelyn's students presented her with a handmade book of drawings and messages that had her crying in the schoolhouse. You'll be a teacher in Pine Falls too, won't you? Little Katie Morrison asked. If they'll have me. They'd be foolish not to, Weston said from the doorway. He'd taken to walking her home from school, a protective habit she found endearing. Their last night in Willow Creek, they stood in the small house Weston had repaired, now empty of the few possessions they'd accumulated. Tomorrow they'd leave for Pine Falls and their new life. No regrets, he asked, echoing her earlier question. None. You? Only that it took so long to find you. She leaned into his solid warmth. We found each other when we needed to, when we were ready. The banker's daughter and the gunfighter, he mused. Still sounds like something from a dime novel. Except we get a happy ending. The happiest, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. Outside, a winter wind howled across the prairie, but inside their small house, there was warmth and love and the promise of tomorrow. The unlikely journey that had begun with violence and fear had led them here, to this moment of perfect peace. What are you thinking? Weston asked. About that morning, waking up in a wedding dress, thinking my life was all planned out. If someone had told me I'd end up here, married to the man who rescued me, living on the frontier, you'd have thought they were crazy. Completely mad. She turned in his arms. Thank goodness for kidnappings and stubborn gunfighters who can't mind their own business. Thank goodness for brave women who don't give up on broken men. You were never broken, just bent a little. Nothing that couldn't be straightened out with proper handling. He laughed, the sound filling their empty house with joy. Proper handling, is that what you call it? Among other things. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Pine Falls was bigger, the dangers different, their life together still uncharted. But tonight, in the glow of lamplight with the wild prairie wind singing outside, Evelyn Mercer Hale knew she'd found exactly where she belonged beside a man who'd saved her life and let her save his in return. 5 years had passed since Evelyn and Weston said their vows in that small Willow Creek church. Pine Falls had grown around them, the railroad bringing prosperity and challenges in equal measure. Their house on Maple Street, once the company provided dwelling, had been purchased and expanded with carefully saved money and smart investments. A white picket fence enclosed a garden where roses climbed alongside practical vegetables. beauty and purpose intertwined just like their lives. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window, watching the dusty street beyond their gate. The afternoon stage was late unusual for this time of year when the roads were dry and firm. She absently rubbed her lower back, feeling the familiar ache that came with carrying a child. Their third, due in 2 months. "Mama, look!" 4-year-old Sarah came running, her dark hair so like her father's flying behind her. "I drew Papa on his horse." The drawing was all stick figures and enthusiasm, but Evelyn could indeed make out a man on a horse, complete with what appeared to be a star pinned to his chest. Weston had accepted the position of town sheriff 2 years ago, when Pine Falls grew large enough to need proper law enforcement beyond the freight company's security. "It's wonderful. Sweetheart, we'll show Papa when he comes home." "Is he chasing bad men today?" Thomas, 2.5, looked up from his blocks with eyes gray as storm clouds, his father's eyes exactly. "No, little one. Today he's just keeping the peace at the cattle auction." The sound of hoofbeats made her look up sharply. Not the stage, a single rider, coming fast. Her hand moved instinctively to the shotgun mounted beside the door, a habit born of frontier living. But then she recognized the rider and relaxed. Tom Rodriguez, grayer now but still loyal, swinging down from his lathered horse. "Mrs. Hale," he said, and something in his tone made her stomach clench. "What is it, Tom?" "Your father, ma'am. Your mother sent word. His heart. The doctor says you should come if you can." The world seemed to tilt. Evelyn gripped the doorframe, forcing herself to breathe steadily. "How long?" "Doc says days, maybe a week. I've got the stage holding at the depot. Changed horses all along the route. You can make it in 2 days if we push hard." "The children. I'll watch them." "Mrs." Morris and Katie's mother appeared from next door. Having heard the commotion, the women of Pine Falls looked out for each other. "You go. Weston can help when he gets back." Within an hour, Evelyn was on the stage, carpetbag hastily packed, trying not to think about how pale her father had looked at their last visit. Tom rode shotgun, his presence reassuring as they rattled through the afternoon and into evening. They stopped only to change horses and grab quick meals. Evelyn dozed fitfully, one hand pressed to her belly where the baby kicked restlessly, seeming to sense her distress. Dawn of the second day found them approaching familiar territory, the hills around Cypress Hollow unchanged despite the years. The town itself had grown. New buildings lined Main Street, and the railroad had arrived here too, bringing modern touches to the place she'd once called home. But Evelyn barely noticed, her entire focus on reaching her parents' house. Her mother met her at the door, looking frail but composed. "Oh, my dear, you came." "Of course I came. How is he?" "Resting. He's been asking for you." Margaret Mercer's eyes took in her daughter's condition. "Should you have traveled so far in your state?" "I'm fine, Mama. The baby's fine. Let me see him." Andrew Mercer lay propped against pillows, his breathing labored but his eyes alert. They lit up when he saw her. "There's my girl, still causing scandals." "I see." He gestured weakly at her belly. "Another grandchild I won't get to spoil." "Don't say that." She took his hand, shocked at how thin it had become. "You're going to be fine. You're too stubborn to leave us." "Even stubborn men meet their match eventually." He squeezed her fingers with what strength he had. "Tell me about your life. The real truth, not the pretty letters." So she told him about teaching at the new school they'd built, about Weston's work as sheriff, how the outlaws had learned to give Pine Falls a wide berth, about Sarah's fierce spirit and Thomas's gentle heart, about the baby they'd decided to name Andrew if it was a boy. "You're happy," he said when she finished. "Truly happy." "Completely. Then I can rest easy. A father worries, wonders if he made the right choices, guided his children well. But seeing you found your path, Evelyn, the right one, even if it wasn't what we expected. You and Mama gave me the strength to find it. Your mother, maybe. I nearly stood in your way." He paused, gathering breath. "That Weston of yours, he sent money. You know, every month, like clockwork. Said it was repayment for the wedding gift, but it was 10 times what I gave him. Wouldn't take no for an answer. He never told me. Good men don't need to announce their good deeds." Her father's eyes drifted closed. "I'm tired now. But don't leave. Not yet." She stayed for 3 days. They talked when he was strong enough, sat in comfortable silence when he wasn't. Her mother bustled around, trying to maintain normalcy through will alone. On the 3rd night, as Evelyn dozed in the chair beside his bed, her father spoke her name. "I'm here, Papa." "You're Weston. He saved more than just your life that day. He saved you from a small existence, from being less than you were meant to be." His voice was barely a whisper. Tell him thank you, from a grateful father. Tell him yourself when you're better." But Andrew Mercer smiled, squeezed her hand once more, and slipped away with the dawn. The funeral was large. Andrew Mercer had been respected, even loved, despite his banker's necessary sternness. Evelyn stood with her mother, accepting condolences, feeling strangely detached. It wasn't until she saw a familiar figure dismounting from a dusty black horse that emotion crashed over her. Weston had come, somehow. He'd arranged things in Pine Falls and ridden hard to reach her. She walked into his arms, not caring who saw, and finally let herself cry. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner," he murmured into her hair. "Tom's message only reached me yesterday. You're here now. That's what matters." James Morrison and his wife were among the mourners. He approached carefully, offering formal condolences. Time had softened the awkwardness, and he spoke kindly about her father's influence on the town. "He was proud of you," James said quietly, glancing at Weston. "Told everyone who'd listen about his daughter, the teacher, and her sheriff husband, about his grandchildren." After the burial, as the house filled with neighbors bringing food and memories, Evelyn found herself in her father's study. Everything remained as he'd left it, ledgers neat, pen laid precisely beside the inkwell. "He was a good man," Weston said from the doorway. "He was stubborn and sometimes wrong-headed, but good at heart." She turned to face her husband. "He said to thank you for saving me from a small life." "You saved yourself. I just provided transportation." "We saved each other." She moved into his arms, feeling the baby kick between them. "What am I going to do without him?" "Same thing you've always done. Live well. Raise our children to be strong and kind. Make him proud. Mama will be alone now. Then we'll bring her to Pine Falls. That house is getting crowded, but we'll make room." "She'll never leave Cypress Hollow." But Margaret Mercer surprised them all. 2 weeks later, she announced her intention to sell the big house and move to Pine Falls. "What's here for me now? My grandchildren are there. My daughter is there. That's family. That's home." The journey back to Pine Falls was slower, accommodating Margaret's comfort and Evelyn's advancing pregnancy. But finally, they created the last hill, and there it was, their town spread below. Smoke rising from chimneys, the bustle of evening commerce still visible on Main Street. "Home," Evelyn breathed. Sarah and Thomas came running when the wagon pulled up, launching themselves at their parents with cries of joy. Margaret Mercer's eyes filled as she gathered her grandchildren close, and Evelyn knew they'd made the right choice. That night, after the children were asleep and Margaret settled in the guest room, Evelyn and Weston sat on their porch watching the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their desperate flight, their unexpected love. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked. "How different life would be if you hadn't been in Cypress Hollow that day?" "Every day." He pulled her closer. "I'd still be drifting, still be angry, still be alone. And I'd be Mrs. James Morrison, hosting tea parties and slowly dying inside. Instead, You're Sheriff Hale's wife, wrangling children and teaching school and causing regular scandals. The very best kind of life. She felt the baby move and placed Weston's hand over the spot. Papa would have loved this one, too. He loved them all. Loved you. That's the kind of legacy that matters. They sat in comfortable silence. The night sounds of pine falls surrounding them, a dog barking, someone playing a fiddle, the distant whistle of the late train. Ordinary sounds of an extraordinary life. Thank you, Evelyn said suddenly. For what? For riding beside that wagon 5 years ago. For saying, she's mine now, and meaning it. For seeing me when everyone else saw only the banker's daughter. Thank you for being brave enough to be seen. For choosing possibility over certainty. He kissed her temple. For being mine. Now and always. A coyote called in the distance, and somewhere a baby cried. Life in all its messy glory surrounded them. Evelyn thought of her father, at peace now, of her mother, starting fresh at an age when most would cling to the familiar, of her children, growing up free and strong in this wild place. The girl who'd woken in a wedding dress, bound for a fate she hadn't chosen, was gone. In her place sat a woman who'd carved her own path, loved deeply, lived fully. The banker's daughter had become the sheriff's wife, the teacher, the mother, but most importantly, she'd become herself. No regrets, Weston asked, their old ritual. Not a single one, she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. The stars wheeled overhead, constant witnesses to the choices that shape a life, and on a porch in Pine Falls, two people who'd found each other against all odds held tight to their unlikely, perfect love, grateful for kidnappers and stubborn hearts, and the courage to choose their own adventure. The end had become a beginning. The rescue had become a partnership, and the gunfighter and his bride lived on. Proof that sometimes the best stories are the ones we never saw coming. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Evelyn and Weston's journey from that dramatic rescue to their beautiful life together. Where are you listening to this story from? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to know and connect with listeners from around the world. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, courage, and adventure in the American frontier. Until next time, partners.